Well, hello, my friends. Thank you for joining me today for Hope for Your Heart. This is Pastor Calvin Corbett, and we are finishing up our Friday broadcast, and we're going to be talking about a very important subject. Now, you have often heard people say, you better walk the talk. You got to do both, right? I'm going to talk to you today about the power of our words. You know, as I think about words, we speak around 16,000 words each day. Now, there's a wide range in that. This figure is based on factors such as gender and age. Women typically speak more than men, but the studies come in that it's somewhere between 10 and 15,000 words every single day that we speak. And some may go up a little more than that. The average sermon, for example, is about 5,000 words. So when I preach on Sunday, a couple of services, and there was the Sunday night service at the prison, I probably go over 20,000 words, but that's unusual, right? Most days is probably around 15,000 words. Well, I want you to know, God is a speaking God. And what He has created, He also speaks. There's something about speaking God's word that brings about power. It also brings about accountability. You know, when I was coming along, when I was 15 years old, I felt the Lord was calling me to ministry, but I didn't tell anybody. I was kind of afraid to tell anybody because I didn't really want to commit myself. And I really didn't, to be honest with you, I really didn't want to do it. I had reservations, and it wasn't that I was like, I'm too good to go. And it had nothing to do with it. I felt like I was totally unqualified. I said, you know, that ministry stuff, that's for somebody who's got more gifts than I do, that's smarter than I am, that is more well-connected than I am, maybe has better personality than I do. And I kind of thought, you know, the Lord's got the wrong person. You know, I'm like the bottom of the barrel. I think He's kind of missed something here. And so I tried to negotiate with the Lord, and I said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to go into business. And I've always liked business, and I want to run my own business. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do, Lord. I'll make a bunch of money running companies, and then I give that money to the Lord. Well, the Lord didn't buy into that. He said, no, I don't want your money. I don't want your business skills. I don't need that. I want you. And I finally got to the point where I made what I would consider my public announcement of going into ministry. And I went before my church as a teenager and said, I believe that the Lord has called me into ministry, full-time ministry. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not sure what that means, but I need all the help I can get as I begin this endeavor of fulfilling God's calling for my life. Now, even after I made that, I still kind of deviated. I still try to negotiate my way out of it. But when I made that public profession of faith of going into ministry, it really helped me. I had people now that were saying, okay, we want to help you. And so I actually started preaching in children's church. And they didn't trust me in big church, afraid I would say something out of line or inappropriate or whatever. So I started teaching as a 15-year-old kid, leading children's church. And it's just amazing how I got that started. I had people that helped me be involved in youth ministry and other ministries. And so it's kind of a neat thing. But God speaks. The heavens declare the glory of God. Psalm 19. And the sky above proclaims His handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There's no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Isn't it amazing? You think, I'm talking, nobody's listening to me. Somebody hears. Their voices go out throughout all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them, He has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom, leaving his chamber, and like a strong man, runs its course with joy. It's rising from the end of the heavens, and it circuits to the end of them. And there is nothing hidden from its heat. And then we drop down Psalm 19, verse number 14. This is a verse I love. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Well, a couple things I want to point out today about the power of speech. And then I want to talk about the purpose of speech. And then we'll wind up talking about the character or the personality of speech. Kyle Otterman, when he was introducing a sermon that I listened to him about the power of speech, began by giving the illustration of Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis. Now, I may be pronouncing his name wrong, probably am, but he was a Hungarian physician who discovered the cause of childbed fever. And there was two hospitals right next to each other. One hospital was staffed mostly by midwives. The other hospital had professional doctors, and they discovered that a lot of the mothers, after they gave birth, were dying of childbed fever. And the rate of those who were in the hospital where the doctors were, that was a higher level of death. And childbed fever was common. It was a deadly infection in maternity hospitals throughout Europe. Semmelweis observed that the death rate from that childbed fever was much higher where the doctors were and much lower where the medical students were being taught by the midwives. So these midwives were experiencing a lower death rate. I mean, it was remarkably lower. Well, they discovered what was happening. And as he looked, he says, these doctors, after they give birth, oftentimes they would do the autopsy of the mother who had passed. And then they would go without washing their hands or washing their instruments and deliver another baby. They were spreading that infection. And they discovered that when they began to wash their hands and wash the equipment, and they even used like a lime, kind of a Clorox, and they didn't realize it was an antiseptic, didn't realize it was a germ killer because this infection was just running rampant. And this was before there was a lot of the development of germ theory. So his findings were fully appreciated. Well, not exactly. His findings were somewhat rejected. Politically, it was not expedient, and in their minds, it didn't meet the scientific method of fighting what would cause this fever. As you think about our words, germs have the power of life or can cause death. Our words have the power of life and death. Proverbs 18:21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. In Proverbs 15, it says, a gentle tongue is the tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. So the power of the tongue can bring life or death, but the power of the tongue can also cause us to grow, or it can crush us. Proverbs 15:4 says, a soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Now, this imagery of the tree of life symbolizes growth. It's talking about nourishment and vitality. Just as a tree provides and sustains shelter, wholesome words can nurture us, can support us emotionally and spiritually. You see, the metaphor suggests that kind and uplifting speech can lead to flourishing relationships and a positive environment. Or our words can be used to crush somebody. Our words can also bring about affection or deception. In the book of Jeremiah, we discover that Jeremiah talks about the tongue being a deadly arrow. He says it is deadly because it can speak so deceitfully. He says with their mouths they speak cordially to their neighbors, but in their hearts they set traps for them. Here's a challenge, that we're to use our tongues not in a deceptive way, but in a way that is truly affectionate. Not just giving lip service to being cordial to people, but actually being affectionate using our tongues. There's an awful lot of power in our speech. There's also purpose behind our speech. And that purpose is really to build up and not to tear down. In Ephesians 4:29, Paul tells us to not let any unwholesome talk come out of our mouths, but only that which is helpful in building up others. Notice how he says to build up others according to their needs. I have the gift of sarcasm, and I've discovered that that would not be building people up. It was meeting my needs, but it wasn't building others up according to their needs. Paul goes so far to say that it may benefit those who listen. You see, words are so powerful. They possess the unique ability to create lasting impressions, to build bridges, or to tear them down. We've all experienced it, right? The encouragement that lifted our spirits, and then all of a sudden, a harsh criticism came along, and it left a very deep wound. In the book of James, there is wisdom that points out a challenging truth about our nature. The human heart can be both good and evil. As we look at the reality of the starkness between good and evil, we must stand one moment and we must speak of love and grace and forgiveness, but then the next we allow frustration or anger to lead us to sharp and hurtful words. The message from the book of James is extremely clear and extremely convicting. James reminds us in James chapter 3 that out of the same mouth, we should be having these two things coming out of our mouths. He says we shouldn't be having praise and cursing. He says, my brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. You see, we have this amazing purpose behind our speech, and that is to encourage others. When I was teaching about the power of our words, and once we say something, it's hard to get the words back. As a matter of fact, you can't get them back. I would use the illustration when I was teaching children, and I'd get a tube of toothpaste. And I would take that tube of toothpaste, and I'd squirt out all the toothpaste and put it on the plate before the kids. And I says, this is like our words. Once they're out, it's hard to get them back. And I said, can anybody come up here and take this toothpaste and put it back into the tube? Well, it's virtually impossible. Once it's out there, it's not going back in. Another illustration I think that can help us understand the power of our words and the purpose of our speech is the illustration of, let's say I have a sword. And I come up to you and I take that sword and I run it right through your stomach. And after I run it through your stomach, I say, oh my, I have made a terrible mistake. I can't believe I have lost my mind so much and I've done this. And so I try to pull back that sword. I take it back out of you. And then I get you the medical assistance that you need. And you survive, amazingly, you survive the thrusting of your sword into your belly. And then I'm thinking, well, you've healed up. You're over it, right? Not really. You still have the scar. You still have the memory of what took place, the pain and the suffering. The same is true with our words. Out of the same mouth should not be coming praises and cursings. You see, our tongues can also be used to acquit or condemn. Jesus put it this way in Matthew chapter 12. He says, one day, every one of us is going to give an account on the day of judgment for every word that we speak. And then Jesus says this, for by your words, you'll either be acquitted or by your words, you will be condemned. Now when Jesus says, by your words, you'll be justified or acquitted, it says justified in the New King James Version. It is not saying that our words possess some kind of a magical power that make us right before God. Rather, he is saying that God-glorifying words are evidence of a saving faith. Just as a fruit reveals the health of the tree, our words reveal the spiritual health of our hearts. In this way, pure, righteous, and holy speech demonstrates the genuineness of our faith. Now, conversely, if our words are evil, if they're blasphemous, or if they're deceitful, that is a sign that we are not right with God. You see, our words can acquit us, or our words can condemn us. Our words can also bring healing, or our words can really bring a lot of hurt. In Proverbs 12:18, it says, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Don't you love that? We can use our tongues to bring healing, or our reckless words can bring about hurt. The older I get, the more I realize the power of encouraging words, the power of lifting up others with our speech. There's something else that we've got to look at when we think about the purpose of our speech and we think about the power of our speech. Let's look now at the character of our speech or the personality of our speech. And to do this, I want to look at the example that David gave us. Now, King David understood the importance of his words. As a matter of fact, he sometimes, like all of us, struggled to speak the right words. But he knew that his speech revealed his character. He implored God to help him. And we have the record of that, of where David is crying out to the Lord, And he says, I need some help when it comes to this matter of speaking. He says, I want my speech to be filled with godly character. So he says in Psalm 141, verse number 3, set a guard over my mouth, O Lord. Keep watch over the door of my lips. And now I get a picture of this, right? And in my mind, I get a picture of a stream of words passing through a quality control inspection. And as the water is coming through the quality inspection, God is evaluating the contents before they are permitted to become speech. Would that be an amazing precaution that would help to reduce life's conflicts? Somebody wrote these words: a lot of things are opened by mistake, but none so often as the mouth. Now, when I was in high school, believe it or not, I took 2 semesters of typing. And I don't know why I did that. I think really the reason I did is because very few guys took that class, and there's a bunch of pretty girls in that class. And so that's why my sophomore and my junior year in high school, I signed up for typing class. And I figured that'd be an easy A to help my grade point average. And good Lord knows, I needed all the help I could get to keep a grade point average up where it needed to belong. But I've discovered something about typing. And I'm a decent typer. I can maybe type about 60, maybe 65 words a minute. But I discovered that the most used key on my keyboard is the backspace key. Now, it's great to have a backspace key because it has the power to erase sentences and to correct typos. When printed work, when I print out something, I can shape it or reshape it. And when I'm confident that every word conveys the intended meaning, I can print it off. You see, speech occurs in real time. Thoughts become sound waves, and they're gone from us. No facility exists for editing or erasing spoken words. Words once uttered cannot be unspoken. The old adage rings true in carpentry and in conversation. Measure twice and cut once. When our guard is down, and any of us can release a flurry of explosive words, our guilt and shame is often immediate. And we wonder where that putrid speech originated. Jesus pulled back the curtain to let us see into the human heart in the scene of Matthew chapter 15. And it's pretty graphic when Jesus said, but the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander. Maybe today, instead of worrying about the words we say, maybe we should look a little bit deeper into the confines of our heart, because what's in your heart will eventually come out of your tongue. There's something else about the character of our speech. Our speech should be filled with the right timing, what I would call flawless timing. In Ecclesiastes 3, verse number 7, it says, there is a time to tear, and there's a time to mend, a time to be silent, and a time to speak. You see, the book of Proverbs is a key source of wisdom literature. It frequently addresses the importance of timing in our speech. Proverbs 15:23 says, a man takes joy in a fitly reply, and how good is a timely word. You see, it's not just using the right words, it's using the right time. You see, these verses highlight the joy and the goodness that comes from speaking at the right moment, suggesting that the well-timed words can bring satisfaction and positive results. One of the things I pray often is not only that I will use the right words, but I'll have the right inflection and I'll have the right timing in the words that I use. Proverbs 25:11 illustrates the beauty and the value of timely speech. I love this picture. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. You see, this imagery conveys the preciousness and the aesthetic appeal of words spoken at just the right time, emphasizing their potential to enhance and enrich situations. We have learned a lot about the character of our speech, haven't we? There's something else that we need to know and remember when it comes to this matter of our speech, that if we can control our tongue, we can have priceless freedom. James chapter 1, verse 26. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. A powerful statement about our faith. If we cannot keep a tight rein on how we speak, our religion is worthless. Many years ago, I had a man that I love and highly regard, and he came to me and he came to me at the end of the service. He said, "I'd like to talk to you." And I said, "Sure, I'll be happy to talk to you." And as he spoke with me, he pointed out that there was some things that was concerning him. And he says, "You are a team player. You do an amazing job. No doubt you love the congregation. You do a good job leading the congregation, but said every once in a while, you use your tongue inappropriately." And I won't go into all the details of the things that he reminded me of, but my first response was a defensive response. I got to admit, my first response was, "Well, who do you think you are? I mean, how many churches have you pastored? How many churches have you started? Have you ever grown a ministry? Who are you to tell me what I should or should not say or how I should say it?" And as I was getting those words out of my mouth, conviction came across my soul. I'm so glad that it did, because it gave me the opportunity to understand that my religion was worthless if I could not keep a tight rein on my tongue. There's something else that we must remember about the power of speech. One day, we will give an account on the day of judgment for every empty word you have spoken. Jesus said in Matthew 12:34, "For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." I love the story of Moses. Moses is highly revered, and he's a guy that lived to be 120 years old. That's pretty good. Some say that he lived the first 40 years of his life trying to be a somebody. He spent the next 40 years of his life realizing he was a nobody. He spent the last 40 years of his life being a blessing to everyone. Well, God drafted Moses at the age of 80. That brings me a lot of hope because I still have several years to go before I turn 80. So if you are 60, 70, 80 years old, your greatest days of ministry are ahead of you. Well, when Moses got drafted, he didn't want to go. He pleaded and he begged God for a deferment on 4 occasions. Of course, God didn't listen. But in Exodus chapter 4, verse number 10, Moses says, "Pardon your servant, Lord." And this is what he says: "I've never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and of tongue." That word slow of speech literally means my tongue is heavy. Moses, in essence, is saying, I am a verbal clodhopper. I have the eloquence of a brick. It wasn't that Moses didn't want to serve God. He'd been angered to the point of murder by the treatment of the Israelite slaves when he was younger. But what God required, Moses thought was way out of his league. The stuff of nightmares. Moses' ability wasn't the issue. When it comes to speaking for God, eloquence is a great handicap. It's a handicap if we let it become a handicap. Paul told the Corinthians, "When I come to you, I did not come to you with eloquence or with human wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God? You see, eloquence isn't unwelcomed in preaching, of course. It's just not the secret of success. I know a dear pastor who stuttered. And when I asked this pastor about it, he said, I've always envied people who could speak words that they wanted to speak at the time they wanted to speak it. I guess it's to keep me humble. It gives me an understanding of other people. There's eloquence in that too. Make no mistake, we're all reduced to mere orators unless God intervenes.
Hickory Ridge Community Church is located at 3320 Battlefield Boulevard South in Chesapeake, Virginia. Sunday service times are 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. We'd love for you to join us. For more information, go to hrcc7.org. And remember, no matter what you're going through, in Jesus Christ there is always hope for you.